All right, welcome back, everyone. This is season three, the first episode of season three. We're looking at episode 72, 2025. Welcome to Beneath the Helmet. I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief turned coach, podcaster, and now two-time author. As we enter into 2025, I'm super stoked for the amazing lineup we have of new guests, some repeat guests that we've had on the show before, and some incredible new guests. Beneath the Helmet's here to ensure that we provide you the value, the information, the knowledge, the wisdom, so you can be an elite firefighter through mind, body, and spirit. So to kick off season three, I want to welcome a fire service legend, FDNY former fire chief, Frank Leeb. So Frank Leeb is an author of this great book here, Cornerstones of Leadership on and off the fireground. Also a brand new book he's just co-published, 30 Fires You Must Know. Frank Leeb is now the director of First Responder Center for Excellence and former FDNY fire chief. Through a great conversation here, he's going to share his wisdom around firefighter mental health, leadership, diversity, inclusion, blind spots that we have as firefighters. And he's going to share a little bit about the FDNY way and how others can embrace that as well. We're going to talk about the importance of upstream support for firefighters instead of being reactive, being more proactive. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 72 of season 3. Here we go. Let's kick it off. Until next time, stay well.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is a great episode. This is our very first edition of season 3, 2025, with a very special guest today. This guest is probably one of the most known kind of fire service leaders in North America right at the moment. He's got a couple of great books out, and I want to welcome to the stage retired and former FDNY Chief Frank Leeb. So welcome to Beneath the Helmet, Frank.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, likewise. So tell our listener a little bit about who Chief Leeb is and your background and kind of what led you up to what you're doing today.
All right. Well, I recently retired from the FDNY after more than 31 years. And I took on a job as the managing director of the First Responder Center for Excellence, which focuses on health and wellness, primarily health and wellness for first responders. So I'm happy to kind of push the ball along in that arena, since I've always had I've always been passionate about that anyway, in my career in the FDNY, and even I'm a almost 45-year volunteer on Long Island in East Farmingdale Volunteer Fire Department as well. So wear the two hats and see it from both sides, both suburban and urban fire departments, career and volunteers. So, a lot going on.
Oh, love it. Yeah, the work you're doing at the First Responder Center for Excellence is top notch. I see a lot of kind of movement in that organization. I think there's going to be some great change that you're going to bring to that organization. So, welcome you to that for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're building now. We're building a strong team, and with a deep bench, and be able to hopefully reach a lot of first responders, particularly firefighters, with some of our in-person learning, but also our online learning modules, which are no cost to firefighters to take.
Well, give us a little snapshot of what the FRC is. Like, what's its main priority? What's its main goal? And where do you hope to take this in the near future?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the First Responder Center for Excellence is an affiliate organization of the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation. Everybody knows what the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation does, not so much with the FRCE, the First Responder Center for Excellence. So our job is to train firefighters, to make it where the the NFFF never gets to meet your family, right? They do a great job of honoring the fallen members. I joke around with Vic Stagnaro, who's the CEO of the FRCE and the NFFF. Our job is to put the NFFF out of business, where they have no firefighters to honor, because we've gone upstream enough to save their lives or extend their lives and make sure where we focus on mostly what I consider the firefighter blind side. We're brilliant at the basics. We train every day on how to stretch a line, how to force a door, how to cut a roof, how to search, how to do rapid intervention, all of that. But we don't focus on the blind side, right? That left side that comes around, sacks the quarterback, and it's cancer, behavioral health, it's wellness, it's fitness, it's nutrition, it's PTSD, it's suicide, it's all these different things that we're not really paying attention to. So again, I call them the firefighter blind side, which we have to be brilliant at the basics. Those things kill us on the fire ground in real time too. But cancer in the fire service, mental health, all these other things, they cumulatively, they kill you off the fire ground. And we have to be making sure that we're training our firefighters and protecting our firefighters from the blind side.
I love the word blind side. That's just a great way to kind of encapsulate that blind area that we have, that area.
Yeah, you think about it on a football team.
Yeah.
The player is responsible. I mean, that's responsible for protecting quarterback's blind side. Makes a lot of money. That's an important position. You got to make sure that you're protecting the quarterback, and without that position, you're in a lot of trouble. And I would say that's really very similar to what we see in the fire service, is that we have seemingly healthy firefighters, well-trained firefighters. And next thing you know, there's an issue crops up, and we could do better. We need to do better.
You had to pick one of the blind sides that are kind of like your most important area that you think the fire service should focus on. What area would that be in the blind sides? There's so many different ones that you talk about: sleep and behavioral health and suicide and all these different ones. What would be your number one that you think we really need to focus on?
Well, so it's just really hard to limit it down to one, but I'd say that we know that cancer and cardiac are the two leading causes of firefighter fatalities. So we know enough to do better when it comes to cancer. What we need is leaders to be leaders, have policies that they enforce, and then we need firefighters that make sure that they prioritize their health off the fire ground when the fire is over, because we should be wearing our SCBA on the fire ground through overhaul, but then we let our guard down, right? Sometimes we don't when we're overhauling, but yet then when we're done on the fire ground, maybe we don't go back and shower as soon as we can. We clean the tools before we clean ourselves. We take better care of our equipment than when we do our own people. And we just have to flip the lens in which we view this from and be just as aggressive cleaning up and getting ready as we are on the fire ground fighting the fire. Because some of these things are just simple, common sense steps that we should be taking. But sometimes we think we're invincible. We don't do a good job of protecting ourselves. And the next thing you know, someone gets diagnosed with cancer, and it is far too common in our profession. And then cardiac related, we need to have physicals every year. We need to make sure that we're keeping ourselves physically fit. And when I mention physically fit, I mean cardio fit. We have to be able to perform on the fire ground. We know that when heart rate increases, we know that a lot of different things happen with our body. There's a lot of stresses that we're under when we respond to a fire. And we have to make sure that we're able to be ready for that, and that we can also recover from that without having any ill effects down the road. Because what we see is sometimes, the firefighter that goes home wasn't really feeling well. They go to bed and they don't wake up, right? Or we hear it the next day they had a heart attack, something like that. So the stresses, we need to make sure that we're making sure we take care of ourselves when it comes to cardiovascular. And then when we think about mental health and suicide, PTSD, those things, we have to really think about how this narrative is and look at ourselves when we are feeling our best and take steps to prevent or minimize the probability or possibility of our people taking their own lives. Dina Alley, who's running our behavioral health programs for the FRC, we're going to be doing a keynote a couple of times in the next couple of months that is prevention by design. It's looking at things upstream that we can do to make it where our people are better positioned to cope when stressful situations arise or when they have feelings of suicide or depression, those type of things. And it's all you think about, whether it's, I was down at the symposium in the sun, VCOS event in Clearwater, Florida, a couple of weeks ago. And I'm looking at the bridges, and all of the bridges, somebody told me that they have lights on them only on one side. So that way the sea turtles know which way the Gulf of Mexico is. And they said that reduces the amount of sea turtles that they have to pick up off the shore and put back in the water, because they've put these lights on the bridge so they know where the water is as opposed to where the land is. And it's such a simple little design. It's why we, with in roadways, it's why they have those circular roadways now, right? Where they're a pain in the neck, right, to get in and out. But that prevents serious accidents. You may still have accidents, but those accidents are, they're not going to take lives. So it's all those different things, but those are upstream solutions, right? When somebody's thinking about suicide and we're telling them to call the hotline, that is such a downstream effect, right? That is like a last resort. Let's get upstream as far as we can. And the old saying, right, that we need to stop fishing people out of the water and go upstream and figure out why they're jumping in or falling in the first place. Well, that's where we need to focus our priorities. We need to get way upstream and come up with some of the solutions that we can there, because this is a wicked problem. So there's three for you. Right?
Love it. Yeah, I love it.
At least three, because there's so many different areas that we have to be attacking. Because here's the bottom line. I love being a firefighter. I can live to be 150 years old and never go to enough fires to satisfy my appetite to go to fires. But here's the thing. If we don't build in mental resilience, if we don't build in this resiliency of our firefighters, then our careers wind up getting cut short. Which is why I say, we can do better on all of these different things. At least, and we're not largely talking about things that I want you to change the way you do it on the fire ground, other than maybe wearing your SCB a little bit longer, right? So breathe the air that you have on your back, things like that. But for the most part, we're talking about things that you can do before the fire, things that you could do after the fire, that are all going to make it where we want to be difficult to injure and impossible to kill. And that's not just on the fire ground, right? That's football players or athletes, wherever it is that we're talking about. We are athletes. The preparation is 99% of it. And then it's execution on game day. So all of the stuff that we're doing before to be ready, and then all the stuff we're doing afterwards to make sure that we are resilient and cleaning up and doing those things, it all matters on game day, but it's the prevention really occurs before and after. Especially that way upstream when we can.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, you note in your book, Cornerstones of Leadership, about the fact about organizational stress and that being also a big challenge. And that is what impacted me and made me retire earlier than I was kind of envisioning through the fire service. So what would you say is kind of some of the key things you're seeing in organizational stress outside of traumatic stress?
Well, and sometimes we don't even recognize as organizational stress, right? We just think it's just the regular stress of the job. But it's, you're working with a new crew, and do you feel like you belong? How fast can the speed of trust, how fast can you build up the trust within a group? You think about the leader that you may have had who has no idea what soft skill leadership is about, has no idea how to communicate with people. You pull up and you say, oh my God, I'm going to have to work with this guy today. I wonder if he's on his medication, right? You never know what you're going to get day to day, tour to tour with some of these people, with some of these individuals. And I think that adds stress. So not feeling confident in your job, certainly. I've had people tell me that they've been stressed out working in certain areas of New York City, right? They may work in a private dwelling area and suddenly they're working they get detailed to a high-rise area. This organizational stress is when I travel around the country, which I do an awful lot right now, and speak to firefighters, poor leadership that they work directly for is the number one cause of organizational stress that I hear from firefighters all the time. Most of the time, they don't say it. They don't say it in the class. It'll be on the break or afterwards. Um, I'll get asked, how do you overcome poor leadership within your department? And for me in the FDNY, I've been blessed. I've been around exceptional leaders, especially on the uniform side. There's been my whole career, been surrounded by great leadership. So I never realized that poor leadership was a problem because the FDNY has a very deep bench, and our leaders are taught from a very young time in their career about leadership and management, in addition to strategy and tactics. And I think that is critically important. I talk about that when I speak. Sometimes I have a few different photos that I'll use of young firefighters with some old firefighters, and I love taking pictures of recruit classes. And I'll tell somebody, "Hey, so look at these. These are the 10 newest firefighters in your department, and you're a department of 100. So 10% of your department is standing here. One of those people, maybe two, will be leaders in your organization. One may be the chief of department. Several of them are going to be lieutenants. A couple of them might be chiefs. Do you recognize that and train them early on in their career that one day they will be leaders? Because leadership, soft skill leadership, all of that management, all should be starting earlier in a firefighter's career. And too many departments, when does it start? Leadership training starts when you say, I do, when you get sworn in to be a lieutenant. It's too late because now you are behind the curve of training. So think about how much of a force multiplier it would be if you were able to train your leaders 10 years before there to be a leader in your organization. That doesn't mean we don't teach them tactics, because you have to be tactically proficient and brilliant the next time out the door. Otherwise, it could injure or kill you. But there needs to be, in each of those trainings, some type of training is preparing our people, preparing our organization for success and succession down the road when people start retiring. Because that's when we see departments at a necessity have to go out and hire outsiders to come in and lead their department. I've seen departments that should be large enough. So if you're a department of 6 or 7, 12 people, might be hard to hire from within all the time. But if you're a mid-sized department, you should be grooming your people to lead your organization. And if you're not doing that, you're failing on some level to be able to do that, because who knows your department's culture, what changes it needs, how to move it to the next level better than somebody who's been within your department. Right? Nobody, no outsider. I couldn't come into your department and tell you about your culture better than you can, because you know the overstory, you know what drives the community, what drives the department. You know it certainly better than an outsider would be.
So going back to the blind sides and the culture around wellness for firefighting, what differences have you noticed through FDNY and your experience as a volunteer as well? Pros and cons? Is there places that are lacking in certain agencies? Is FDNY like far superior than most volunteer departments, which I would assume with resources and capacity and depth, like you said? Any thoughts there around those two kind of overbranching fire service branches?
Yeah, I think so. The FDNY is an entity unto itself, right? But certainly not perfect. There's room for improvement in every organization, big and small, career and volunteer. It doesn't matter. But the FDNY does an awful lot when it comes to, just our counseling unit, for example. The FDNY's counseling unit is second to none. I think about fire, then I think about two different incidents that I had in my career. One was in October of 2001, shortly after September 11th. And I talk about this in Cornerstones of Leadership. We responded to plane crash in the Rockaways. I was on duty, and we stretched the hose line. There were bodies everywhere. There was fire everywhere. There were houses on fire. It was really a surreal event. And I went home that night and was just totally numb. And it was, it was 270 people lost their lives, something like that. It was one of the deadliest aviation incidents in United States history. And I went home and I was totally numb. Shortly after September 11th, nobody called me. No one to see how I was feeling, how I was doing, how I was coping. It was up to each of us to figure out how to cope with it. I didn't even think anything of it, right? It was just to me at that time, it was part of the job. 2001, I was on the job for almost 10 years at that point. And really it was just part of the job. And then I fast forward to January 9th of 2022, that I think about the 2024. I think about the Twin Forks fire. 2020. I'll have to edit this part out. So I think back to the Twin Forks fire.
Yes.
Which was only a couple of years ago. And at that fire, that was wound up being a fifth alarm fire. And on the fifth alarm, Tom Richardson, who was our chief of department at the time, he was responding and called in our counseling unit. And I think about that fire, and I mentioned that because we had 17 civilians die at that fire. And I remember thinking about looking at my people and how devastated they were that we had lost 17 people. No, it wasn't because of our effort and our dedication, our training, right? So our people we played to win on every run, every tour, every shift in the FDNY, and they felt like they lost. And Tom Richardson knew that our people were going to need the counseling. And before our people went back to the firehouses and EMS stations, the counseling unit was on scene. And I think about that in stark contrast to 2001, October, at that plane crash, to where we came just a couple of decades later. And our counseling unit was largely expanded after September 11th. So here we were several decades later, and they knew to have our people, our counseling unit at the scene for us. And I think that is just, I can't think of a better example, because even the counselor before I left came over to me, wanted to say, "Hey, bro, I just want to make sure that you're okay." And I had never even thought that I might be impacted. And I'm still impacted by a fire. It'd be impossible for you to care about people, care about this job, care about being a firefighter, and having that many people die in a fire, not impact you. And I didn't, during the fire, I didn't go in the building. It wasn't until after the fire that I went in the building. But I witnessed, we did CPR on 32 people at that fire. And I had a ringside seat in front of the building watching all of it. So I needed it. And then I think about the next day, when the counselor called me the next day and said, "Hey, bro, I'm just checking up on you." And I'm like, "That's really cool." And I said, "Yeah, Chief Richardson told us to make sure that we follow up with you. He wanted to make sure that we didn't forget anybody. Because sometimes we'll forget about the incident commanders or chief officers, just like we sometimes forget to relieve them, right? It's a fifth alarm fire. They've been there for 5 hours and they're still operating on a fire floor. We forgot, we just forget to relieve them. We relieve the engines and trucks like 3 times already. The 3 rotations, the chief he's still in there.
Yeah.
And likewise, it's just making sure that we don't forget any of our people. And that difference from one year to 2 decades later, I think, is a very stark and good example.
Yeah, beautiful. So compare that to your volunteer organization. How does that relate? I'm assuming the resources are not there, but tell me.
Yeah, so it looks
Tell me
different.
how that looks. Yeah.
In my volunteer department, it certainly looks different. We have a couple of people that are trained as peer support folks, and then we have a larger team that they can reach out to. So anytime that there is an incident that needs to have counselors come in, the volunteer fire service is able to reach out to different organizations, usually through the town and the county, and bring in counselors. But it's that recognition of it. So similar things are in place. We just need everybody to recognize when we need it, and recognize that, to me, we're all peer counselors. We're the first peer counselors for our firefighters, right? On scene or even back at the firehouse. So if I come off of a run in my volunteer department, maybe we just had a car accident where there were 3 people trapped and one of them didn't live. And maybe one of my members was the last person to speak to them. Maybe not. Maybe it may not even been at that level. Just it might be the first time a young firefighter, it's the first time he's experienced death or she's experienced death. And they may handle it a little bit differently than the rest of the crew. The rest of the crew might come back and, have our dark humor jokes and stuff like that. And we have a way of dealing with it. But we have to make sure that we're watching out for all of our team members, that person may need help. but which is why we all need to be peer counselors and know when it needs to be elevated. Likewise, our family members need to be, to a degree, peer counselor, because they are the first responder for us. They're the ones that are going to see when you have a change at home. Maybe you've become closed off. Maybe you don't really speak much, or maybe you're abusive or started abusing drugs or alcohol, stuff like that. The family members a lot of times see that. So we need to make sure we're educating them as well. But the volunteer fire department in my area of Long Island has a robust system in place. I've seen them activate multiple times in the past couple of years. It just looks different because we don't have an internal peer team the way New York City does. And I see that around the country. Most places have it. The problem is when you go into really rural areas of the country that may not have the resources, because they don't even have the staffing to maybe have it, where they may have struggles with having people be peer counselors or bring in somebody in. And I think about, for those areas, that's what some of the online modules that the First Responder Center for Excellence is developing now, some that we'll have out in a couple of months. We have some on our learning management system now, but as we build these out, the idea is that you can go on free of charge no matter where you are and take these classes. And at some point, we'll have one developed that is kind of like just-in-time training, where usually experience an incident. We'll go on here and it'll tell you some of the things that you can do. And it'll also tell you what's normal. Because sometimes people don't know what's normal. How should I feel after the first time I've seen somebody dead at a fire or at a car accident when you never had it? In my generation, we just sucked it up and figured out a way to deal with it. But not everybody's capable of doing it, as we see, right? Because we've lost far too many of our brothers and sisters. And sometimes we lose them, like I mentioned earlier, to drug or alcohol abuse, or they wind up with a divorce. It doesn't necessarily end in suicide. It could end this many different endings that still might end career. So we have to be aware of all of these different things, and many of the ways it could look, because it doesn't always look the same, which is why it's very difficult to look at somebody and say this person is definitively, suffering or needs counseling. It's a wicked problem.
I'm curious about the Center for Excellence. Is that available for people outside the USA, or is that strictly just for USA residents and firefighters? So somebody
No, so for this,
Canada,
for the online training, anybody could go on to our website, firstrespondercenter.org, look for the link to our learning management platform, and you can take the classes. We have a stress first aid class on there right now that's really good. So it's open to anybody, anywhere. That's a great question.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I noticed in one of your stories, you're talking about the elevator entrapment. I think it was at the Macy's. I think there was an elevator scenario. Yeah. And just the word that you use, psychological first aid, for working with the patient, because really all it was just calming them down. It sounded like it wasn't necessarily a trauma call, but I could be wrong. But it sounded like it was.
So the lady had a foot court. Yeah, her lady had a foot court and escalator, and she was very upset. There were plenty of people. There were 100 people standing all around, screaming and yelling. And we had to keep ourselves calm, right? Which we should. We're the professionals, and then kind of calming her down. Hey, it's going to be okay. We'll have you out. And we had her out in no time. Hey, we're here. We're professionals. We know what we're doing. And I mean, it was a great example. We certainly had to provide psychological, emotional first aid to the patient. Tell her it's going to be okay. We knew what we were doing, so we were certainly experts in carrying out our assignment. But the importance of having a B, C, and D, which we had there, the importance of training, preparing for the possible, all played into account at that, because that incident just under 2 weeks previous, we had a fire a Target department store in the middle of the night that started in an escalator. And when I went to that, at both of these, I was the incident commander. I was a battalion chief working in the 4th Battalion. And when I went to the escalator fire, I didn't really know that much about escalators. Certainly, I didn't know where to turn the power off. Now I know about the main line disconnect, and that's the top of the escalator, typically in the easement. We just want to operate safer, more efficient, more effectively. And if we do that, it usually winds up and results in better outcomes for the victim, which is the entire reason why they called 911 in the first place. If we showed up and it worse, why bother calling?
Mhm. Well, I just love the element because I believe that we probably do that on 99% of our calls is psychological first aid. Calming down that patient, calming them down, right? As well as treating them, extricating whatever it looks like. Yeah, or
And you
whatever.
think about how good we are at that, right?
Oh,
We
yeah.
do subconsciously. So we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll respond to a child who was riding a bicycle, got struck by a car. The child's there, and so is the mother. And we're providing psychological first aid to the child and to the parent, and also giving treatment to the child. So you think about, we just do that naturally when we respond. That we are so good at that. Most of us, most of the firefighters are. Some don't have some don't have good side manners,
It's,
but
yeah.
have them kind of stand in the book. But yeah, those that are good at it, some of them, they are really good at it. And it's just almost subconsciously how you're doing it. Just part of being a good person, good human is, kind of making sure that we're telling the parent, hey, it's going to be okay. Your child is bleeding a lot because she had a head injury and the head bleeds a little bit more. It doesn't need stitches or whatever it is, right? It's just, it's going to be okay. You just wait, if the ambulance is a day, you just let them know what's going on. And you think about how much that impacts, how far that goes to, building our reputation with the public and them feeling secure and confident in our abilities. Because that's where they see us most of them, right? Is on medical runs. Hey, where you working?
Love it. Love it. So, Chief, as I was when I actually had a little note to bring this up to myself was that plane crash where 265 were killed that day, and you mentioned already being numb and kind of not feeling anymore. If you're cool with it, I'd love to go back and kind of find out what brought you out of that. What brought you out of being numb, no feelings, back to being more Frank-like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Like I said, that night I went home and I was very upset as I was talking to my wife. And I said, what have I become? Like I have no emotional feeling. I had no emotional attachment. And I know, so self-preservation for me has been anytime I've responded to a horrific incident that involved children or multiple people or whatever, I've done my best to not learn about the people because when I make it personal, it hurts. So I didn't want to do that. And, in this particular instance, it was back to work. It was, shortly after September 11th, and there was, there was no time for me to worry about me. It was, we still had brothers and sisters that were missing. There were still thousands of people that were missing and were to a degree counting on us to, if not bring them home alive. I mean, at that point in October, it was at least bring them some closure. Um, and I just think time handled it, and obviously speaking with my family, but also going to work and being with the brothers that I worked with and the sisters that I worked with. That was incredible therapy for me. It's just listening to one another, and in a way, other than talking to my wife about it, like I never spoke. The firefighters I worked with, I was in Squad 270 at the time. I was a firefighter, and we were incredibly close. And I don't think I ever spoke to them about that I was struggling with, that it had no emotion because I wasn't struggling with the incident itself, which is kind of strange. I was just struggling with the fact that I had no emotion, and I'm like, I should have an emotion. I should have an emotional response to what I just saw that just was a part of, and it was just like the very next day was just business as usual. Back to going back down to the trade center site and looking for the missing people. And then just over time, I mean, and I think over time, just from September 11th and then that incident, and I just became resilient to it. Probably more from just talking to people, being there for other people, which which I realized, now that I've taken enough classes and read enough books on the topics that I know that sometimes just listening to people and giving them an ear to listen. And then when you speak and people listen to you, and I had that with the firefighters I worked with. I think I was a pretty good listener, and I know that they were really good listeners when I was talking. And it was, we were a true band of brothers and sisters. We had one sister in the firehouse at the time, and we were a true family. And we spoke about a lot of difficult topics, but never, I don't remember anybody ever saying that they were having trouble dealing with that plane crash. We knew plenty of people were having difficulty dealing with September 11th. It was, certainly to be expected. But this incident a month and a half after was just different. And for me, it just, as I reflect back on that, because it was just, hey, suck it up and recover on your own. Yes, we all did. I couldn't tell you about all the other people that responded. I was on the first alarm to that, but I wasn't the first unit. I can't even imagine, even with the first unit, the first engine and truck pulled up to that, how those responders, here we are decades later, but we were basically left on our own to recover.
Wow. Have you felt that sensation of being numb and no feelings since, or has that did you deal with it and process it, and now you've kind of healed from that emotional reaction?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I think I learned coping mechanisms, and now I understand coping mechanisms significantly better than I did. I think I haven't had that feeling since, but also the evolution of the FDNY and counseling services also played a big part of that, right? So when I would go to anything now where it was a lot of victims or something like that, the counseling unit would just show up, and it's usually peer counselors, and they also come every once in a while. They just show up at the firehouse just to drop a couple of business cards, let you know, maybe to give you some information that you may need or whatever. And it's become better ingrained into the culture of the FDNY, better than ever before. And I think about, even when we think about suicide, I was the chief of safety for a little over a year at the FDNY, and every year we do a safety week. And the year that I was responsible for, we did suicide awareness, and recognizing how impactful that was, right? So think about how that is such a safety issue for a fire department, making sure, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And we want to make sure that we're keeping our people safe. Talk about, something that's right in the strike zone of what safety chiefs and safety officers need to be talking about in concert with our counseling unit. And the feedback on it was incredible. And I'm confident that we prevented some tragedies in that. Hopefully we prevented them and not just delayed them.
Yeah.
But I think, we have to be able to talk about these things if we really want to save the savables.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It makes me think about the chaplaincy program that's, I know, very prevalent in the FDNY and a lot of other fire services. Did that change when the peer support came into and the counseling unit came into action? Did that change, or did it just kind of go hand in hand as a perfect kind of unity?
Yeah, so I'd say they go hand in hand because they show up. They're all over the place as well. They show up at a large fire and different events. They're a big and important part of the FDNY as well. So I would say they more work in coordination with each other than anything else. But the counseling unit is so big, and the peer counseling service is so part of it is so big. Oftentimes, firefighters, when they retire or they, depending where they are in their career, they volunteer to do that. They have a lot of retirees that take that, and it gives them an opportunity to come hang out in firehouse. They'll have a day where they're just assigned to go to one or two firehouses. They go to one for morning coffee. They go to one. They have lunch in the firehouse, and they talk about it because then they have one of their peers can talk about it because they've also been there. Especially when some of these members have benefited from peer counseling or the counseling service, they can speak firsthand about the information. We even have it where retirees, some people have a hard time transitioning into retirement. um, where they'll reach out, and they'll help them with that as well. So there's so many different things. There's different organizations that have yoga and meditation. You think about all the different things in some of the classes. You'll talk about journaling, and so something I know that you've spoken about on your podcast quite a bit.
Yep. Yep.
So all of these things, right? The whole ecosystem of what the fire service is, what wellness looks like, what resiliency looks like, um, in our fire service community. It's a lot of different pieces. So many firefighters unaware of it's out there. Early in my career, some of them didn't exist, but even as my career progressed, a lot of times I didn't even realize this whole ecosystem was out there. I've had access to. Now I do.
Yeah. Well, and you're spreading the good word. Yeah, I got an upcoming podcast with Robert. His last name's escaping me at the moment, from FDNY. And there's a new initiative, FDNY, of TRE providers. So tension trauma release exercises. I think there's at least 10 or 12 of them that are being certified to teach this in-house now. Are you familiar with that program?
Yeah. So Rob Cifoli.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Rob's great. So Rob's a friend of mine, but he was so I was the chief of the fire academy, and I was the chief of training. During both of those jobs, Rob was the head of our fitness unit, and he does a phenomenal job with that. In fact, I was on the phone with him for like an hour and a half last week, just talking about this topic. I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge, and he's used it, right? He's had success. He's had success with that in his own life, and he speak the good word about that and tell me what some of the things that he's doing, because like me, he loves our profession. He wants to help firefighters where we can. So I'm sure that'll be a fantastic show. I do not want to talk too much about what he's doing, because I don't want to ruin his show on him.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be a fantastic show that I'm sure I will listen to.
Awesome. Well, you just brought up the yoga and the meditation. I thought, oh, that's a perfect segue into bringing this up, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm a TRE provider. I teach TRE as well.
Okay.
Mostly to firefighters and first responders in Canada. And it was a tool that I used for my own self. That's what helped me get out of burnout and kind of thrive again, was TRE. So yeah, it's kind of nice to see other, agencies, especially FDNY, embrace this kind of different modality, right? So
yeah, and they'll tell you that took him out of a bad place on where he was. So it's and he told me, he's like, yeah, it doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. I'm hearing it work for you. So I think we have to be, as leaders and folks in this area, in this, there's still a lot we don't know, right? We have to have a beginner's mindset and be open to what's out there. And especially when we have good people standing behind it, and with the understanding that it doesn't always work. Unfortunately, we don't have a one size fits all for any of these solutions, but we have to be open to finding solutions that appear to have some promise and that all work.
awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit and go into some leadership talk, because it's another passion of mine, and I know it's a passion of yours as well. So I had the great chance to read this book over the last few weeks, and what I loved about the book was the integration of real life stories with leadership nuggets, and kind of intertwining those together. So it wasn't just stories; it was stories that highlight leadership nuggets for us to learn from. So I'd love to kind of just start off with what sparked the writing of this book. What made you want to put pen to paper here?
Well, so it's funny because I never wanted to put pen to paper. It was Peter Matthews from magazine who asked me to be the keynote for Firehouse Expo. And after I said yes, and after I did the keynote, I had multiple people tell me, like, you got to make the keynote into a book. And a couple of people were really persistent on that. So eventually I drew an outline of a book, and I'm like, I think I could do this. And because in my career, I've had so many stories, and so many stories that had really good leadership lessons. And I would speak about them, and I spoke about some of them in the keynote. And really that was the genesis of it. I didn't want to write a book with cool stories just for the sake of writing cool stories. So, if the story didn't have something with leadership that mattered, I have several chapters that my son was my editor, and he said, "Dad, this chapter doesn't go in the book. It's a fun chapter, but it doesn't add anything." I said, "All right." So we just took those chapters out. And whatever, whether we're talking about inclusive leadership or whether we're talking about making sure, uh, you're there and doing stuff with firefighters, and you don't expect them to do things that you're not willing to do yourself, or whatever the lesson, have a lesson. Some of those lessons came from early on in my volunteer career, and others came late in my career, up to the Twin Parks fire. That's in there as well as, um, and yeah, it's time tested leadership principles with some really cool fire experiences that I've had in my career, because I've had I've certainly had my share of crazy incidents that I've responded to, or different experiences, whether being deployed to Hurricane Katrina in 2005, or um, just different things. It was a wild ride, for sure. A lot of it,
Well,
and filled with a lot of really good leaders, which was the majority of the story. The book is about people that I met in fire stories, how that molded me to be the leadership philosophy that I embraced later in my career. So it's about everybody else, their impact on me and on the larger fire service.
so what is your leadership philosophy in a nutshell? How would you kind of elevator pitch your theory around leadership? What's that sound like for you?
Yeah, so I look for people who are into the job, that love the job, that are passionate about it, that want to learn, that care, um, and are willing to learn. And so that's basically when I'm trying to get firefighters to come that want to work with me. For other leaders, I'm not a micromanager. Mm, I am very clear on what my expectations are. Um, and I typically won't tell you how to get the job done. I will just tell you the job that I want done and what my expectations are, beforehand. And uh, job enlargement, people that want to be able to do more, thrive in those environments. And that's if you surround yourself with those type of people that are loyal, loyalty's a big treat to me. I am very fiercely loyal to people who are loyal to me, and you can do anything when you have people that care, uh, and that are into that are into what they're doing. So I try and avoid the slugs. So slugs don't like to work with me or for me. Um, you know, they're, they're the people that I would rather do nothing. They'll spend more energy trying to get out of work than doing the actual work. So if you think about, as a child with slugs, if you put salt on a slug, what happens? He shrivels
Yep.
up, right?
Yep.
Even in Canada, they shrivel up. I know.
They're much bigger
So,
here though.
so we all have them. So the idea is when you're a leader, who you surround you with, be the salt in your department, be the salt, and repel those slugs. So slugs don't want to be near salt. So if you're a good leader, the slugs are going to avoid you. Um, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. A rising tide lifts all boats. We have to have a minimum standard. We have to hold our people accountable to that. I I like to say that by having a standard and holding your people accountable shows them that you care for them, because you're looking out for their health and wellness and safety. And training, safety is a byproduct of our training. We operate safely when we're well trained firefighters. So, um, as a safety officer, I viewed the fire scene or an emergency scene through the lens of safety. As a firefighter, when I arrived on scene, I really never viewed the fire through the lens of safety. I viewed it through the lens of my training. So safety was a system running in the background, but it was a byproduct of my training. So safety is a byproduct of our training. So I don't know too many firefighters that arrive on scene and they look at it from a safety standpoint. I look at it from my training. My training tells me that I could go in that window, that window is not going to light off. Well, I'm going to get up there and get after it. But if I show up and I see that's about to light off, and while I'm getting the ladder, it lights off, well, my training was right. So I wasn't thinking conscientiously of safety. Safety was that program running in the background based on the frequency and the high fidelityness of my training. So safety is in the eyes of the beholder. I could look, an untrained firefighter is going to look at a window and determine if I can go in there very differently than a seasoned firefighter that has some training. And that's the difference, right? So if I told a firefighter that has 10 years, I want you to go and search the second floor. And then I told a firefighter, or I told a civilian, I want you to go search the second floor. The outcomes and the way they go about that are going to be very different. Who's going to do it more? Who's going to do it safer? Well, if the civilian goes in the building, the 10-year firefighter is going to do it better because because of the training, not because he's thinking about safety and being risk averse. He understands the environment. If someone reported trapped, that firefighter is going to push a little bit harder, but he understands the fire environment. And if he can't push in, or she can't push in, then they won't. But it's going to be based on their training, because they're going to understand the risk that they're taking because they were trained. The civilian may not understand the risk because they don't even tell that room might flash over. They'll be, what's a flashover? If you don't know what a flashover is, you're going to be operating in a riskier way than someone who does. And I think we can change the narrative on how we view that. As an incident commander, I have to look at it from safety. As a safety officer, a safety chief, you damn well better be looking at the fire through the lens of safety, because that's your job. That is your specific responsibility. But otherwise, as a firefighter, I looked at it based on my training, and my size up was based on my training, not based on safety.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it, but it makes sense when you say it like that. Does complacency come into this? Any part of this whole leadership trait? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, complacency is one of the hardest things to fight back, and that was complacency. There's one of the chapters in the book talks about an incident. I'm working in ladder 117, and Jerry Tracy's the chief in the 49 Battalion, and we have had a super busy night. It's like 3:00 in the morning. We get a call to this building, and we go inside. The alarm's going. Then I get 49 to 117. 117. How tall is the building you're in? I don't know. I'm thinking, I have no idea. My inside team is the Can 9. I turn to the Can firefighter who's a pro. How tall is the building we're in? He said, 4 stories, sir. Immediately. So 4 stories. I get nothing back from the chief. I turn to the probie. I'm like, you better be right. So we go outside. The chief's still there. I'm walking over to the car, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking, and sure enough, the probie was right. So I go over to the chief, and Chief Tracy says to me, I just wanted to make sure you weren't being complacent. If he only knew. He knows now because I told him a couple of years ago. Well, he had no idea. He didn't remember that because he had always, that's just what it was part of his DNA to always be teaching and making people better. But I got off the rig. We had a lot of nights. We had a lot of runs that night, but it doesn't matter, right? In my hand, I had that piece of paper that told me exactly the SIDS information on the building. It told me exactly how tall the building was. It told me where the alarm panel was. So I walked in, I had to find the alarm panel. All this stuff was like I was in the dark because I was complacent. And the probie saved my bacon. I went back and told everybody the story, both in the engine and the truck that night. Because what if there was a fire? And I didn't know. In the American Fire Service, we lose firefighters when we don't know where we are in the building. And here I was the boss. I was responsible for the safety of my crew, and I was complacent. And I'm into the job. I care. And I use that as a learning lesson. Like I said, another lesson of a leader who was always trying to make me better. And that was a big lesson on complacency.
What an awesome.
Hard. Yeah, when you're not going to, if you don't go to, all night, we didn't go to any fires. And I'm like, here we are, another alarm ringing in the building. We've been to 5 times already. And next thing you know, it's a fire and you're not prepared. And now you don't have tactical or strategic superiority. And that's when things start to happen because the boss didn't know where he was in the building. The boss didn't know how tall the building was. The boss was sleepwalking. And the next thing you know, the probie doesn't know because he was sleepwalking, but he wasn't. And the next thing you know, all the holes are aligning in the Swiss cheese. And then it's when bad things happen. But the probie stopped the dominoes. We stopped the holes from aligning.
Yeah, I appreciate that story because I think it also kind of highlights another leadership trait of being vulnerable with your crew and telling them, owning up to your mistakes, owning up to your errors, owning up to maybe something you didn't notice. I think that's a huge leadership trait as well. What's your thoughts on that as being a trait of being vulnerable, open, honest with your crews?
Well, so, and I appreciate this question because I'm not above my firefighters, right? So I'm accountable to my firefighters as they are accountable to me. And like, I can't tell them that they got to be ready to go to work if I'm not, right? Do as I say, not as I do. No, I got to do as I'm saying as well. I should be talking the talk and I should be walking the walk and making sure that I'm doing the things and equally holding people accountable. So if I wasn't doing my job, I would start a critique after most fires by telling them what I saw or what I thought I could have did better. But I would also give them the leader's intent, what I was thinking. When I made that decision, this is what I was thinking. But what I didn't know is this. And then I would turn into maybe the chauffeur. I love the way you position the rig. And you put the ladder to that window. What made you do that? What did you see? Because I may not have seen what he saw. So now with that sharing of information, everybody's hearing what the chauffeur did, what he was thinking, and then hearing what I'm thinking. If I'm working with the same people all the time, which is usually the case, the majority of people I work with, they knew what I expected. They knew what I was about. They knew my leader's intent. So the more I imparted my leader's intent on what I'm looking at, what I'm looking for, they start looking at things like that. So my firefighters could wind up giving me insight and information I was unaware of. Because there could be something going on that I'm not aware of, but they've heard me speak about what I'm looking for, or what's important to me, that they know enough to make sure that they give me that transmission. And I'll have somebody drive me for the first time, and I'll tell them, listen, I know this is your first time driving me, but here's what I'm going to tell you. We're a team. If you see something that I need you must speak up and tell me. I don't want to hear afterwards, oh, I thought that wall was going to collapse, but I didn't want to say anything. No, we are a team. Firefighting is a team sport. And I need you to understand, you have to make sure that you're informing me of something you don't think that I see. And I was fortunate that so many times as a battalion chief, a lot of times the chauffeurs of the rig, whether it was Billy Pence in ladder 136 or Joe Tarantini in 138, or I mean, just so many other people. As a captain, hearing it from ladder 22 and the transmissions they would make, and then as a chief, that when the different people that would drive me, both the assigned folks and the people from the firehouse I was in 287, ladder 136, when they would drive me, and then as a staff chief, driver Joe, he was always trying to stay a couple of steps ahead of me, knowing what I wanted, what I was going to, because he was in the car with me all the time. He drove me every day. So we were always drilling and talking about fires in the car. So, there were times it was almost like we shared the same brain. He knew exactly what I was thinking before I even told him. I'd be like, hey, Joe, do me a favor. I want to know if we could put some towel ladders on that other exposure. Let me know. He goes, yeah, we could put 2 over there. And I already went and spoke to them, and we had to move a police car and an engine out of there. And I already got 2 towel ladders going over there. All right. I mean, you think about that, right? That force multiplier on the fire ground, when he's thinking, that's 3 steps ahead and it's already done. So those are the things. So the other point I'll make on that is Driver Joe was a chief in my volunteer department. He's got 40 something years in the volunteer. He was a firefighter in New York City, but he understands leadership because he did it elsewhere. So put your people in the position that they are best suited for success. So this guy had leadership experience. He was a chief officer. He was a chief for 8 years in the volunteers. So now I get to utilize him as not only my driver, but also another set of eyes and ears on the fire ground. That's invaluable. We are all safer and better when we put our people in the best position that they're suited to for success.
What makes me first thing that kind of pops on my mind when you're describing this is crew resource management through the airline systems. That's that system of having a set of eyes, a second, second brain essentially sitting next to you. And that's what I see a chauffeur or any of your other mentors that you're talking about. They're there as your second set of eyes, your second set of ears, your second brain. I think that all adds up to a huge amount of safety reduction or safety increase, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And that is a really good analogy, because when I talk to someone, whether they're driving me in, I'm working in a ladder company or in a battalion, or wherever I am, my job is to accelerate the speed of trust between myself and the driver, and also to make sure that there's no barrier, that they understand, like, I can't stress enough that we're a team. You have to give me the information that I need. Whether you know me, whether you don't know me, like, it's up to me as the officer to make sure that I articulate that enough. Because otherwise, it's the pilot and the co-pilot. Co-pilot doesn't say anything. Captain's in charge as they crash into the mountain. So, yeah, so we can't allow that. So that's a really good analogy.
I love the CRM concept. I think that's just what a simple concept to prevent injury and death and accidents essentially from occurring, right? So I love that.
Yeah,
kind of
totally
clicked when
agree.
you're talking about. My gut says you're a very human centric leader. Would I be accurate there?
I love my firefighters, and they know that, and I care for them. And, so when I would take our successes personally, and I would take our failures personally. And I had my finger on the pulse of what was going on. I'm retired. I still put my finger on the pulse of what's going on. I care very deeply for my profession and for my firefighters. And I've seen way too many of my friends die, and I've seen way too many of my friends get injured. And like, I want to see us do better. So I left the FDNY, but you never really leave. I joke around, you never leave the FDNY. You're always part of the family, and it's cool. So I have other ways to continue to contribute, and it's good.
It's in your blood. I can tell it's in your blood. So as we kind of come to a conclusion here, what would be one little nugget you'd love to share either on behavioral health, leadership that you want to leave our audience with that you'd feel kind of remiss if you left it out?
Well, I'll give you two. I'll give you one for leaders and one for firefighters. So for chief officers, because this is something I'm realizing is a problem more than I ever realized. Chief officers that they don't go to the firehouse, they don't visit their firefighters. And like, you gotta go to the fire, because the firefighters know what's going on in their organization. And sometimes there could be a morale problem, and it's something that you can fix in a second. And you don't even know it if you don't go there. So go there and talk to them. Talk about fires. Talk about whatever it is that you have to. When chiefs that do go, sometimes they go there and they want to talk about being in uniform, overtime, and other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you got to talk about all that stuff, but always lead with fire. Go to the firehouse and lead with fire. So you may have gone to a fire in the FDNY. The chiefs have a big response area. So I loved when the chief would come and tell us fire stories. Chief, you went to that fire last night. How was it? Oh, tell me all about it. It was great. Nowadays, I could go with photos, videos, whatever. I could screen mirror, put it up on the TV, and we can have a conversation, a drill, just on that. Talk for an hour just on 5 different photos that I have, or a minute and a half video. I just posted 2 videos in the past couple of weeks. Actually, this week on LinkedIn about 2 different fires. One in the Bronx on a second floor, and one a taxpayer fire in Queens. And the one video is like 36 seconds, the other's a minute and a half. I could run a drill for 3 hours on each of those little videos, just talking about all the different things. When people say, I don't know what to drill on. You don't know what to drill on. Like, I don't know. I have a hard time choosing what to drill on, because there's so many things I could drill on. So I think So for the leader, let me land this plane here. So for the leader, visit your firehouse, visit your firefighters. You show them you care that way, and then always lead with fire. Lead with fire. Tell them something fire related first, and then talk about any of the other administrative stuff. That shows you care about them because you understand what could kill them on the next response they go on. For firefighters, stay learnable, stay into the job, make sure that you're learning something fire related every single day. That's a lesson I was taught early on. And the other thing I would add on to that is maintain your flexibility, because flexibility is so important. And whether it's yoga, whether it's stretching, meditation, the different ways that we can maintain our flexibility and our resiliency, those two things are super, super important. And young firefighters don't often understand that because they already are flexible and resilient. So, but you need to combat that as we age, for sure. So those would be my two nuggets.
I'd love to ask you one more question if you got time. I want to kind of, pick your brain on how do we work with the newest generation a little bit better? I do a lot of coaching with firefighters and fire chiefs across North America. And the struggle is always the Gen Xers versus millennials or Gen Zs and all that. And there's just conflict all the time. And I don't think there needs to be a conflict. I think there needs to be, I know it shouldn't be like that. I know there should be more of a team atmosphere and use each other's strengths. What would be one kind of tool that the listener could hear right now is like, okay, I understand that I need to, because I think you talk about in your book that you need to be ensure you meet the firefighters where they are. I thought that kind of
Yeah.
stuck out to me. So maybe you can expand
Well,
on
and
that.
that's what you have to do. Yeah. So this generation of firefighters isn't better or worse. They're just different, right? Just like our generation is different, but even the greatest generation, the generation before them said they suck, right? So here we are, and we're saying the next generation, no, this generation learns differently. We have to meet them where they are. And the way they learn, they're tech native. We just have to make sure that we are meeting them where they are. And that is, where are they? They're on their phones. They're on their, all of these different devices. So I had somebody come up to me and say, the probies aren't reading the manual anymore. I said, they're not. What are they doing? They're using this app called Quizlet. All right. So how are they doing on the tests? A 99 average. How many tests? 12. So you're telling me they have a 99 average after 12 tests? What's your concern? My concern is that they're not reading the books. Yeah, but they're passing the tests. Are they learning the knowledge that you want them to? Because if they're not, that means your questions suck. So, but if they're learning the knowledge and they're passing the hands-on, then they consume information differently. Talk to a college kid today, and they'll tell you that they don't always read the book. Some cases, they don't even buy the books. They go online, they find different ways to learn, different videos. So they consume information differently. So we have to make sure that we're giving them information in the mediums that they consume it. If we're just forcing them to learn the way we learned, well, then we shouldn't expect good results for that. Your programs are perfectly designed for the results that you're getting. You may need to change those. And that's the moral of that story. And the FDNY now, they get iPads or some type of tablet. There's lots of computer learning that they have. But guess what? We can now track how long they're on the computer. I'm really struggling with this. Oh yeah, how long did you study? Well, I was on my tablet for 6 hours learning. No, you weren't. You were on for 36 seconds. So there's benefits to us. We can see it. So we have to meet them where they're at. That's the difference. Other generations did that as well. And by the way, we've been learning that there's a lot of good ways to learn that are good for us as well. I've learned different studying and learning techniques from newer generations. We have to tailor different programs. They don't come on as electricians and carpenters and plumbers, so they don't understand building construction the same. But there's different ways that we could capitalize on that. And eventually, it's just that generational thing that we get. Every generation has it, but meet them where they're at is the key.
Yeah, that's what stuck out to me when I read that was meet them where they are. I thought that was a key phrase because what I find is most people are trying to force them to turn into us and learn like us and the traditions that we used to be accustomed to, right? So it's
And it
nice to
doesn't
see.
work.
No, yeah,
Yeah, think about it. If generations before us did that, right, we'd still be using pens, you know, like you think about some of the stuff that we'd be doing if we still had to learn
yeah,
the other generations did.
yeah,
So it's different and it's exciting. Technology is gonna enhance the way we learn, and eventually, AR and VR are gonna certainly even help us even more on how we
yeah.
teach. So
I agree.
a lot of exciting things to come.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Chief, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to pick your brain for the last hour. How can people learn more about you and maybe purchase your book and also your new book that's coming out, 30 Fires You Must Know, which you've co-authored? Tell us a little bit about how we can get a hold of those as well.
Yeah, so both of those are available on Amazon. If somebody was interested in buying a bunch of them for the crew or something like that, you can reach out to me, first responder consult at gmail.com, and then also on um, uh, Cornerstones of Leadership on Facebook and Fire Frank 76 on Twitter. Just typing my name on LinkedIn. Sometimes I'm a couple of days behind on getting back to you on those, but also you could type in my name and have a link tree is another way you can contact me as well. So I'm not that difficult to get in touch with.
No, no. How about a quick little 30-second on your newest book? What's that all about?
30 Fires You Must Know is exactly what the title says. It's 30 different fires where we go in depth. What we did was it's with Billy Goldfeder and I co-authored it, and we picked 30 fires. And Billy writes the intro. Somebody who had intimate knowledge of the fire, or in many cases was at the fire. They write the body of it, and I write the training points at the end of the chapter. All of the royalties from that book are going to 4 different organizations. They're going to the Tunnels and Towers Foundation. They are going to the First Responder Center for Excellence, the Ray Downey Scholarship Fund, and they're going to the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. So we're not making any money from the royalties fund.
Cool, very cool. What a learning nugget and kind of a treasure of gold in that book alone, right? So,
Yeah, it's been say what, a labor of love for sure. And yeah, it was. And then another book that just came out that I wrote a chapter in is the Book of Search. I just got it in the mail just yesterday. That one, the Firefighter Rescue Survey, all the proceeds from Foley Moore are going to that book. I just got that. That's a pretty cool book. That's available on Amazon as well.
awesome. Yeah, I just saw the cover. Looks like is it a Paul Coombs cover or is it a?
It
Well,
is, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like awesome. Well, Chief, it's been an honor, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with the world through your books, through your speaking, everything like that. It's much appreciated. I love the passion that you still have for the job, even though you're retired. So, and thanks for your continued work with the First Responder Center for Excellence. I think that's going to change a lot of people's lives. So, thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Hopefully, you enjoyed this great episode with Chief Frank Leeb, Season 3. Until next time, stay well. All right, that's a wrap, Chief.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.